Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the All In Learning series. I'll give everyone a minute or so to join. See those participation numbers going up. All right, I'm going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. We are super excited for this topic. This is the third learning series of the Adult Literacy and Learning Impact Network. It's a new series designed to showcase what is working in the field of adult education. We know a lot of the challenges, and what we are excited to do is show how we can, work together to improve literacy skills, access, and attainment nationwide. So super excited for this learning series. My name is Sarah Casisio, and I'm the director of the Adult Literacy and Learning Impact Network. We are convened by the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy. And if this is your first all-in event, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. We were overjoyed to see the interest in this topic, centering adult learner experience or prospective adult learner experience is one of our passions in this work. And we had over 340 registrants for today's session. So keep up, the focus and interest on this issue. And with so many people, we do ask that you use the Q&A to keep track of ongoing questions. We'll have a couple of minutes, in between each segment to kind of talk through some of the questions. And of course, we'll be monitoring the chat throughout. So feel free to keep conversations going in the chat. As I mentioned just briefly, the All In Learning series, it's a virtual experience. It's really designed to showcase what works. We want to hear from people in the field about what kinds of initiatives are designed, funded, evaluated to demonstrate real and measurable change. So each month you can join us with guest speakers on different topics. And our goal is to really improve programmatic efforts for adult learners and families at the local level in line with our National Action Plan for Adult Literacy. If you want to go to the next slide, thank you so much. So All In, if you're new to us, we are convened by the Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy, but this is a network, a collective impact network of 11 national organizations. We bring together leaders across sectors to really implement 3 key goals of the National Action Plan for Adult Literacy, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But our organizations are amazing. We include American Library Association, Barbara Bush Foundation for Family Literacy, Coalition on Adult Basic Education, which you may know as COABE, Dollar General Literacy Foundation, who has been an incredible partner and sponsor of this work, Houston Mayor's Office of Adult Literacy, Jobs for the Future, National Association of State Directors of Adult Ed, which we call NASDA, Jobs for the Future, I mentioned that one, sorry, National Center for Families Learning, National Coalition for Literacy, Pro Literacy, TESOL International, and World Education, a division of JSI. And I just want to mention all of those organizations because this truly is a collective impact network. Each organization brings their own, expertise, experience, partnerships and collaboration to this work to strengthen our cohesion, our alignment, and really advance adult literacy across the country. I also want to note that this is not limited to the Coordinating Council, who is part of this group. We also work with so many researchers, direct service providers, leaders across the field, in and outside the field, really, because we do believe in a cross-sector approach. So we thank you for your contributions. If you've worked on any projects with All In or the National Action Plan, we appreciate constant feedback to really inform our thinking and, more importantly, our actions. Next slide, please. So today's session is really aligned with some of the initial pieces in the National Action Plan for Adult Literacy, which was put together with over 100 experts in the field in workforce development, corrections education, research, and, of course, direct service and adult education. And we had identified kind of 5 key initiatives. I want to, make clear these are not in order of importance, but really they're mutually what's the word I'm trying to think of? I can't remember. But I lost it.
They
Oh,
complement
reinforcing.
each other. Mhm.
Yes, thank you. They mutually reinforcing, initiatives, and this work really aligns to number two, which is expanding outcomes focused research. One of the pieces in the National Action Plan was we just don't know enough about what adults with low literacy experience in terms of how they learn best, what their fears and aspirations are, how they understand their own reading and writing skills, and importantly, what inspires them to seek services. And so many of our partners, like Dr. Margaret Patterson, as well as Greg Smith and Florida Literacy Coalition, have done some work on why people enroll or the barriers to enrollment. And we wanted to kind of take that to the next level and understand it at scale. So we're super excited to share with you today. Next slide. So this is a major, major issue. Many of you in this room already know, but about 28% of adults ages 16 to 65, that's an estimated 58.9 people, can only read short, simple sentences. And while it's problematic to always compare adult literacy levels with children's literacy, that's around or below a third grade reading level. So we know this is really challenging. People that struggle with literacy, my own mom has struggled with literacy her entire life. And, it's a challenge to navigate jobs, healthcare, public systems and services, family life. And especially now with technology, all of that is even more trying if you're struggling with foundational reading skills. So thanks so much for joining us today. I see the numbers going up. Please share your name, where you're coming from in the chat. And we, are so excited. So fewer than 20, sorry, yeah, thank you. So this is the last slide about All In, and then we're going to get to the research. So investing in adult literacy really has the potential to impact all of these other areas: health, a skilled workforce, national security, civic engagement, children's learning, and community safety. And in fact, community safety is one of those areas that's not a correlational connection, but a causal relationship between getting interventions, academic services while incarcerated, and reducing recidivism by up to 43% for people who participate. Education changes lives, changes families. And so we want to make clear that this is a root issue to so many of the other competing priorities that we're dealing with as a nation, which right now, if you read the news today, it's a lot. But we know that foundational literacy skills, everything from reading, numeracy, digital, are just profoundly connected to our ability to improve positive health behaviors, close the reading and digital divide in the workforce, improve military rates for military entrance exams. So this is just an issue that impacts so many other aspects of our individual and society life. So today's session is about breaking barriers to literacy access. We really do believe that adult education is an issue of access. It's an issue of investment. And we wanted to learn from adults who are living every day, navigating life every day with low literacy across the United States. And so we partnered up again with FTI Consulting, who's been an incredible partner over the last 2 years, to survey 2,000 adults across the United States and understand really their perspectives, their fears, their aspirations, and what excites them about learning. And with that, I will pass it over to Ronell, my partner in crime in this work, to share, our research findings. And again, keep the chat active. We'll be here, add questions to the Q&A. And thank you for joining us. Ronell?
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. So, as Sarah mentioned, my name is Ronell. I'm a director here at FTI Consulting based out of our New York office. I've been working very closely with Sarah, with the Barbara Bush Foundation and the All In team for the past couple of years, actually. It's been a while on this very exciting, very important research. So, I'm thrilled to be with you today. Firstly, I want to just thank you all for having me here this afternoon, and a big thank you to All In as well for the incredible work that you all do. It's a real pleasure to join Sarah and share this work, and I'm particularly excited to share some new findings specific to adults with low literacy skills that we've been working on over the past year. So today I'm going to start by walking you through some of the key findings from our DC policy influencer research, as well as some research we did among American employers before giving you a glimpse of the new research among adults with low literacy. So before I do that, I'll just leave this on the screen for 2 minutes, not even that long, a few seconds, just so you can all scan the QR code. That way you can download the reports in full and you'll find far more detail there than I'll be presenting today. So make sure you scan the QR code. I'll give it one more second. Okay. All right, so jumping in. In this first study, we covered perspectives of adult literacy from a DC policy influencer viewpoint. This is an interesting audience, as I'm sure we've all seen and heard. There's a variety of sentiments on education broadly, but also adult and family literacy from across the political spectrum. So this survey was designed to cut through the noise and identify how this policy audience perceives the state of adult literacy and what they think the barriers and the solutions are to addressing the low literacy issue. So on the methodology for this study, we conducted this survey online among an audience that we're calling policy influencers. So these are folks who work in at least one of the organizations you see in the little bubbles on this slide. So they're either in Congress, the White House, or a federal agency of some kind, a political party, a PAC, a campaign, think tank, trade association, labor union, or they work in comms or issue advocacy on the Hill. They also have to be active and engaged in the space. We made sure that they read at least 3 Beltway type publications regularly. They have to pay close attention to policies and debates specific to literacy, education, labor, and employment. You'll see that we surveyed 200 policy influencers. We had a good split of political affiliations among the sample, in addition to a range of policy specializations among respondents to the survey. So you can see that all on the right of the screen. So jumping right in, this first slide, I think, is a nice start. We assessed how familiar policy influences are with adult literacy, and you'll see here that 95% claim to have some level of familiarity with the issue, which is a pretty big number. And it's certainly a good starting point for any discussion of adult literacy with this audience. They have some base awareness. But what's most interesting here is the 30%, the dark blue area of the pie chart. Those are the folks who say they are very familiar. And this is the real number that we want to see increase over time. These are the folks who really understand the issue, and not just the issue itself, but the impact it has on the country more broadly. And despite most policy influencers saying they know someone who is struggling with literacy issues, that's the 76% figure that you see in the call-out box next to the pie chart, only 1/3, again, report being very familiar with the issue. So this could be because adult literacy seems to mean something different to different people. For instance, on the right side, you'll see a notable proportion of policy influencers think adult literacy means English literacy. And this is far more than those who associate adult literacy with things like comprehension of written material or basic math skills. So adult literacy meaning more than one thing is something to be mindful of as we try to communicate with this audience. And so against that backdrop of this varied interpretation of what literacy even means, we found that those surveyed greatly underestimate the scale of the issue, even despite most knowing someone who struggles with low literacy. So we see here that over half of respondents underestimate the number of Americans who struggle with reading, writing, and doing basic math above a third grade level. And what's particularly interesting is that 39% of those who have struggled with literacy issues themselves are also underestimating the scale. And in fact, less than 1 in 4 provide a roughly accurate estimate of adult literacy rates in the US, despite that huge number we just saw saying that they're familiar with the issue. So right away, we're seeing a pretty significant gap between perceptions and the real world extent of the challenge. And looking to the right of the slide, you'll see a majority identify socioeconomically disadvantaged people or undocumented people, people with criminal records as the top 3 demographic groups most likely to exhibit lower adult literacy rates. And so from a policy influencer perspective, these are the top groups that are most likely to be left behind if nothing is done to address this issue. So part of why majority either underestimate the issue or don't consider adult literacy to be a major issue in the first place possibly relates to what we see on this slide, which is that the majority of policy influencers actually think adult literacy rates are improving. They think recent efforts to address the issue have been effective. They think literacy rates have been on the up and up over the past 3 to 5 years. They think over 80%, sorry, think that US adult literacy rates are better than the rates of other OECD countries. And new data has just come out recently that shows that the US ranks 36th in literacy among these OECD countries. So a huge disconnect. And while few respondents say that recent efforts to improve adult literacy rates have been very effective or have resulted in significant improvements, this slide really does show that disconnect, right? Those who we surveyed really think the picture is improving. They think it's not so bad. And so therefore, they think the need to prioritize adult literacy and find a solution is just much lower than other issues, which we see on this slide. So the challenge is where this issue sits in relation to other education and labor priorities. And it shows really how important it is that we all collectively act now. So of course, this must be strongly impacted by the perception that adult literacy is improving and it's not so bad. The US is doing better than other OECD countries. But I mean, unfortunately, despite what we all in this virtual room know very well, it's just not seen as one of the most important issues facing the country right now. So the more familiar policy influencers become with the issue and the more they realize how connected adult literacy is to some of these other issues like workforce shortages, the more likely they will be to rate it as a higher priority to address in the near term. Which is a nice segue into the next section. Here we'll focus on the perspectives of employers in the United States, their perspective towards adult literacy and the potential impact that they're seeing in their day-to-day operations, their interactions with employees, and so on. But before I get started here, any questions on the policy influencer data? Let me see if I can pull up the chat. Okay, I see Sarah's fielding some questions already. Okay. All right, so I'll keep going for now. I'll quickly recap this survey methodology for you all. So for our employer study, we surveyed 500 mid to senior level executives who are working for medium and large companies across the US. These respondents had to have responsibility for hiring, training, or managing employees to qualify to participate in this study. So for this survey, we wanted to be able to examine the opinion of industry. So we identified 4 key industries to focus on: retail and consumer goods, wholesale and distribution, restaurants, and transportation. all of which typically tend to employ more people who struggle with literacy skills, and they don't typically require employees to demonstrate higher educational attainment, such as an undergraduate or graduate degree. So these employers experience the challenge of adult literacy limitations firsthand when looking to hire and empower their staff. So understanding the challenges they face and the benefits that increased literacy can provide were our key areas of focus here when we designed and conducted this study. So as we saw with the policy influencer audience, there is significant variation among employers on what adult literacy even means. So while half consider adult literacy to mean basic reading and writing skills, a notable percentage consider elements broader than that. So you might have noticed that if we compare both audiences, basic reading and writing and comprehension of written material are far higher in association with adult literacy for employers than for policy influencers, who are more likely to associate adult literacy with English literacy or financial literacy. So while there is this variation in what adult literacy means, the majority of these employers are feeling the impact of low literacy, with 94% of employers calling out adult literacy as a problem. And 4 in 10 we see in the navy blue at the top of the bar chart say it's a widespread problem. Not only is it a problem, but it is having a significant impact on these employers' bottom lines. When we asked what percentage of their revenue they think could be lost due to low literacy levels among their workforce, respondents cited an average loss of nearly 5%. We did some math, and that equates to about $46 billion a year. And truthfully, that is probably an underestimate. It's probably much higher than that, especially when you consider that many employers are underestimating the challenge and many employees could be contributing to their employers' companies at a much higher level if they had better literacy skills. So this point is really key because we found here that nearly 1/3 of employers think that their employees do not have the minimum level of literacy required to effectively do their jobs. And this is particularly high in a restaurant setting, which you'll see in the call-out box on the left, also in wholesale and distribution. And this is huge. As we've seen, low literacy does have a clear impact on the company's ability to generate revenue, but it also has a huge impact on the employees themselves and their willingness to take on new challenges or to ask for help. So this was echoed in some focus groups that we conducted among adults with low literacy. I'll touch on that a bit later, but you're seeing some illustrative quotes here on the right of the slide. Some participants mentioned that a lack of confidence in their ability to do their jobs stopped them from wanting to go for promotions or impacted their confidence at work, and that adult learning programs from their employers helped them learn the skills that they needed to learn to advance into higher roles, which benefits not only these adults themselves, but their families and the business as well. So low literacy is really preventing some employees from realizing their full potential. It impacts their productivity and it leads to a sense of isolation, which brings me to the next slide. What are the day-to-day impacts of low literacy skills, right? What we see here is that very often it's their ability to use digital tools and it's that digital skill set. Low literacy is preventing employees from using new tools and resources and processes within these companies. And you can see that coming through here with the little yellow highlights. Employers across all of the industries we surveyed stated that using digital tools is a real challenge for their employees. So, interesting findings. I'll pause here again for any questions on that audience. Otherwise, I will jump into the exciting findings from adults with low literacy themselves. I see Sarah is also continuing to do a good job answering questions. Great. All right, so I'll just jump in. All right, so what do adults with low literacy skills think and experience, right? As Sarah mentioned, the National Action Plan highlighted the need to really understand the perspectives of these individuals specifically. So in our latest research, the objective was pretty clear. We wanted to better understand these adults' experiences and their unique perspectives when it comes to learning and developing multiliteracy skills. And importantly, we wanted the insights and the data from this study to really inform programs themselves, right? Adult learner-centered programs and engagement with this group nationwide. So to get to this, we took a very careful approach, exploring key areas shown on this slide. So first, we looked very closely at the goals and aspirations of this group. What drives them? What motivates them? How can literacy impact their lives, right? We wanted to highlight the barriers they face and what could help them overcome these hurdles. We wanted to measure enrollment, engagement, and interest in adult learner programs. We wanted to identify what types of services and learning approaches can help advance literacy and opportunities for learners. And we wanted to determine the most effective ways to communicate with this audience and really reach them, reach adults with low literacy across the country, and keep that communication style specific to their lifestyles and their learning experiences and what they expect. So with that in mind, we developed a mixed mode approach. I mentioned the focus groups earlier, but those then led to a very well-informed survey to achieve these main objectives. So I'll spend just a couple more minutes talking about the approach here, just because we were really driven by the need to be thorough, to be robust, and to be truly accessible in how we conducted this research. You'll see these six steps that we followed. The first step was to recognize the need for counsel from a wonderful advisory group of experts who have been conducting their own research and publishing papers about adult literacy for years. So their feedback, their contributions, we had some very thoughtful conversations. All of them were incredibly helpful in creating both our qualitative and our quantitative instruments. And this step really ensured that we were able to define the audience in the most appropriate and inclusive way. We ensured that the topics in the initial focus groups were reflective of the answers and the potential solutions that we were looking to get to. And working with this team, we recruited and conducted 4 focus groups online. Each lasted 90 minutes. And we ensured that we had representation across generations, as well as a group specifically for job seekers to learn more about their unique experiences, their goals, their aspirations, and perspectives around literacy skills learning overall, to get their take in their own words. Once we had those insights, we were able to take what we learned from the focus groups and build out a quantitative survey to put numbers to these experiences, to identify what factors could create an effective and engaging adult learning program, and to essentially quantify their full experience across the board. So while this was important, what was equally as important was ensuring a positive user experience for each respondent taking the survey. So to that end, we ran the survey online and via telephone, as well as through text-to-cell mobile deployment to ensure we were reaching those who are not online. We fielded the survey in both English and Spanish. The question and answer text was programmed in large, clearly visible size and font for those online. And the questions were written in plain text. They were phrased to be easy to navigate for someone with low literacy. For instance, there were no complex grid questions, and great care went into how wording was used throughout the survey, and it was timed to be no longer than 10 minutes. So while we had all of these provisions in place, we wanted to be doubly sure that respondents were comfortable with the survey. So we ran two pilot studies, one in English, one in Spanish, to see how people would respond. And so we could make any adjustments based on their feedback. We had questions at the end of each pilot asking for that feedback. And for example, were the questions easy to read? Were they clear? How would you rate the survey experience? And the results from the pilot studies were overwhelmingly positive. So with that, we were then able to move into full field work, and we reached a final sample of 2,000 adults with low literacy. And these are the results that we are thrilled to share today. More to come as well. But jumping in on the demographics of those who took the survey, one of the big points here is the connection between income level and literacy level. 56% of the 2,000 adults with low literacy who we surveyed earned less than $30,000 a year. And although less than half of the sample were parents of kids under 18, we'll see some findings specific to them later on. For instance, they were more likely to be interested in enrolling in adult literacy programs and to attend classes in person. And as you can see here, our sample is nicely distributed consistently across gender, across generation, ethnicity, employment, region, and locality as well, be it urban, suburban, or rural, which also led to some distinct findings that we'll get into. I also want to take a moment just to go a step deeper into the respondent profile, and in particular, their unique characteristics. So 3/4 of those we surveyed were not enrolled in adult learning programs. Most did not achieve a high school diploma. Just 1 in 10 say that they fully understand English. And in the middle here, this is a list of tasks that they find challenging. So understanding different arguments in an article is the most challenging, along with understanding messages from their doctors, reading medicine labels, using technology to search for information. So key day-to-day tasks that they find challenging. So what did we find among this audience? The first top left box is there is huge potential here, really. Adults with low literacy have overwhelmingly positive feelings toward learning. They understand how it can unlock their potential. Those who are younger and parents are more likely to associate learning with some negative feelings, largely things like fear and anxiety. But also, one of the most insightful findings here is that many don't know adult learning programs even exist. Awareness is very, very low. However, a huge amount of respondents would be interested in these programs if they had the opportunity to attend. In particular, those younger folks, those with learning differences, for example. But that said, there is this perception, mistakenly so, based on what we all in this room know, but there is this perception of high cost as a huge barrier to enrollment. Also, a fear of failure is another huge barrier standing in the way of folks potentially enrolling. And moving to the bottom row, adults with low literacy want hybrid classes. They're interested in about 2 to 3 classes a week, ranging from half an hour per class to about 2 hours is the maximum. And the role of a supportive teacher in a small group type setting is really critical. That came up in both the focus groups that we ran and also this survey. That supportive teacher who guides them through the process is just essential for continued engagement, continued growth, and adults with low literacy feeling driven to keep going to class and driven to really improve their skills. The human touch is really key across the board, right? So the last key finding here is that people-focused stories of those who have successfully improved their skills is a very important motivator. It really encourages those with low literacy, as does encouragement from their loved ones. rather than like more external things like awards or prizes or external recognition, for example. It's really that human element that keeps this group going. So the rest of the slides I'll share will illustrate the key points I just ran through, but starting with this good news, almost everyone surveyed acknowledges the importance of improving their skills. Those with learning differences, which is things like dyslexia, for example, are much more likely to say it is very important, as are those with no educational attainment at all, or younger folks, those seeking jobs, and those with some education as well. And from a personal perspective, the key driver here, or the key benefit that folks think they would unlock is confidence. It's the number one benefit of learning. Being able to feel confident and better about oneself is significant. We heard that in the focus groups as well. And outside of this primary reason, being able to manage tasks better, meet new people, connect with your community, use technology effectively and safely are also very important areas of personal potential. And then when we look at this from a professional standpoint, getting more work done and the ability to collaborate better with colleagues really lead the way. And this echoes what we heard from the employer study, which is literacy impacting things like productivity and folks being able to take on new challenges within their organizations. It's very cool to see the data from both sides. Now, this is a big slide. Um, I mentioned this in the executive summary, but awareness of learning programs is really very low. Just 20% have heard about these programs and are knowledgeable about them. But when we ask whether they would be interested in enrolling in these programs, 84% said they would be interested, and 1 in 3 would be very interested. And among that group, those with learning differences, women, younger learners, or younger potential learners, and parents are more likely to show that strong interest in enrolling in adult learning programs. So what areas in particular do adults with low literacy want to prioritize? You'll see with the little highlighted yellow box that better communication and understanding more words are the top 2 choices. The latter in particular is a big focus for older learners, which you see in that light blue bar behind the navy blue. Younger folks over-index on public speaking and finances, while older people really emphasize digital literacy, understandably so, whether that's using technology or writing emails. And something that came up in the focus groups was using it safely, right? Knowing how to navigate a digital world and not be vulnerable to things like online scams or cyber threats. So that's very important for the older group. Interestingly, another thing that came up a lot in the focus groups, 1 in 5 want to improve their penmanship, and this increases to a quarter of younger adults with low literacy. It came up quite a bit. I think in every focus group we ran, penmanship is it's important and it's associated with literacy overall. But we should be very mindful of the perceived barriers to enrollment. So I mentioned this earlier again, but the perceived cost of learning programs is significant. It's consistent across all demographics, the parents, the younger adults with low literacy, the older adults with low literacy, particularly older adults. You'll see that, excuse me, in the call out, 58% of those Gen X and boomers and older think cost of the program is just such a huge barrier when we all in this room probably know that most of these programs tend to be affordable or free. So this perception is really a huge challenge. And those who are less concerned about cost of the programs often face other hurdles, including that fear of failure, lack of confidence, or simply constraints based on their time and their travel abilities and having to work and so on. So lots of barriers. I think another one that stood out for me is not knowing anyone else in the program, which you see to the right. It really underscores that human element that we mentioned before. They, this group really needs people to help them get through this process, help them get past the fear, provide answers to their questions along the way. The human touch is really key for this group. But at the same time, they do appreciate some alone time, some learning alone. Um, it, I remember in the focus groups, folks mentioned sort of that stigma or that fear, that emotional burden to being someone with low literacy skills. So wanting that alone time to really practice and learn and improve on your own without this fear of being perceived as someone with low literacy is really critical for this group. And format-wise, I just want to call out here that on the right, parents are more likely to attend in-person classes. And we know that there are many 2-gen programs that allow parents to study or attend class while their children are in daycare through community-based centers, places like the YMCA or family literacy programs. So we see that here, but generally, online is preferred, particularly among those who are in rural areas and those who have higher income. Those who want only in person tend to be in the cities. They tend to have learning differences, which makes sense. They need more of that direct in-person support. And also younger learners are more likely to say that they'd prefer strictly in-person classes. However, this perception of online learning is split among this group. Roughly half the folks think that it means using an app or watching videos on their own time. Other half thinks it's an actual class that's scheduled and it's a video call and you get online and you learn at the same time as a teacher. So this is also something to be very mindful of is if you're advertising an online learning program, half the people who see this ad will think of it as one thing and the other half will think of it as another thing. So it's very important to specify what it means in the case of whatever is being advertised, just knowing that the perception is really broadly split. And I mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate, the people aspect is key. People-driven strategies are really what are going to motivate learners to enroll and to improve their skills and to stay engaged. It's hearing the stories from people who have done it before, whether it's people who share a similar background to them or not. Stories from people in general are the way to go, even more so for those who speak English as a second language. So it's really critical to do the success stories and the spotlights on successful learners and folks who really understand the challenge, have been through it, and have come out on the other side. And with that, I will close the presenting element for today, but I'm sure we'll take any questions, any additional thoughts from you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Ronelle. And,
No
thank you for
problem.
everybody. We've had a really active chat. I think this topic brings up so much in terms of, how we're serving people. And I wanted to just reiterate that this survey was um, taken both over the phone as well as by digital tools. And so if people were not able to participate in the written format, they were able to participate in a phone format, which really helped us get at that group of learners who have those emerging literacy skills. A couple questions that came up that I thought might be interesting to talk about. And Ronelle, I'm not sure if you talked too much about the focus groups leading up to developing the survey. I know you mentioned it in the methodology, but I think some of those stories that came up in the focus groups were really helpful in informing how we conducted the full survey, especially the use of technology. So
For
one of the
sure.
questions that came up in the chat is, you know, we know digital skills is a high need. Employers are saying it, learners are saying it. And at the same time, we saw people across generations already using technology,
Yeah.
in many cases as a workaround. So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about what some of the focus groups participants said or survey about how they're using technology to support their skills already.
Sure. So we were surprised actually to hear in the focus groups that almost everyone is successfully using technology. I think we went into them thinking that folks are gonna struggle and not have so much experience, especially the older folks. But they were very, very well versed in using technology. And the thing is, it's almost a crutch for this group. They rely on technology to help them get around the fact that they have low literacy skills. So a lot of folks mention specific things like using voice to text dictation to send communications out, to text their loved ones, to write letters, to communicate just in general, and not just voice to text to communicate, but also having their devices read to them so that they can understand what messages they're receiving or do their jobs or look for new opportunities or answer questions that they might have using things like Google. So technology is not something that they have no experience using. They're very well experienced using technology, but they want to improve on that. They want better skills, and particularly for older adults with low literacy skills, they want to be able to use it safely and wisely. They don't want to be at risk for cyber threats. They don't want to be vulnerable to scams because they're struggling to sort of understand technology and use it well. So it's not that they aren't using it, they're using it quite a bit. It's something that they rely on a lot, but they want to improve the way they use it. They want to use it more and better.
Great. And I see a couple of more questions coming in. There's a lot of talk about um, the best ways for volunteers to get interested or getting trained. Yes, many of our partners work in that area, including pro literacy. You know, there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved and become part of the adult education system. We did another report that was our last learning series in January, and if you're interested, we have that recording about the capacity of adult education providers to meet the demand. I think one of the key components of this report that I just want to reiterate is that there's a lot of misunderstanding about who adults are that struggle with literacy, right? There's so many reasons why people were not able to complete their education or, you know, attain the skills they need to be successful in their work or family or life. But very important is that the demand is there. People value education. People want to, you know, improve their skills. They want to support their families. They want to build confidence. And so we're really excited about this report showing a positive view of adults with low literacy and showing a demand, really, right? Like one of the key audiences for this report include, you know, state directors, adult educators, providers, but also policy influencers, right? Like we want to demonstrate to our government, our elected officials at the state, local, and national levels that this is an area we need to invest in, right? As I mentioned at the top, it's an issue of national security. It's an issue of workforce development. It's an issue of, you know, our children's learning. And we didn't mention this at the beginning because as somebody mentioned in the chat, there's just so much data to cover. But the results from our national report card show that fourth graders and eighth graders are also struggling to be on grade level, right? And this is an issue of multi-generational impact. So we're really working to make sure that people understand, especially our federal government, our state governments, that investment in adult education is necessary, especially as you mentioned, those 2-gen programs, right, where we can think about addressing this issue um, at multi-generations at the same time. Many people have questions about the slides, about the report. And yes, this is so much information to go through in a quick 60-minute period. We have an all-in reports page that we dropped into the chat. If you put in your name and email, it will automatically give you access to those reports and sign you up for our updates, so that you can receive notification when our new report comes out. Shout out if you're going to be at COABE, which is the Coalition of Adult Basic Education Conference coming up March 30th to April 2nd in Dallas. I'll be presenting with FTI Consulting, Ronell's colleague. James will be there with me, and we're presenting April 1st with the full report. Hopefully we have it available that day. So we'll be very excited to share that full report, so you can, download it, highlight it, ask any questions you have. I hope everyone knows now you're a part of the All-In community attending this learning series. You are free to email us directly, or contact us, and I'm just going to drop that once again, that contact us. There's several ways to stay in touch, through LinkedIn, through email, through our and I see everybody putting their emails in the chat. Perfect. We'll just download that. We'll sign you up. Any other questions, and feel free to come off mute. I'll just ask, there's been a lot of questions about how we broke down English learners versus non-English learners. We actually found a lot of similarities across both groups, right? We ended up breaking it down by generations. And so, for example, we noticed that Gen Z and boomers, we broke it down by generation, were using technology to support their literacy needs. And there was just a lot of things we learned based on generation, whether or not it was English native speaker or not. Although we did break down a couple of things by English learner as a population, as well as parent learners. We also broke down some of the report findings by whether or not they lived in a rural community, and or if they had learning differences. So there were key characteristics that we looked at in more detail. So for those of you in rural communities, understanding that there should be more hybrid or online learning options. But then that real interesting piece of what is online learning, right? And how are people perceiving the definition of online learning? So there's a lot to unpack here in this report. One other question. Yes, I got a question about, will this report include recommendations for connecting with adult learners? Yes, as I mentioned, this is kind of a sneak peek of our findings. The full report will have extensive recommendations, especially on how to more effectively market and communicate your programs. So yes, we'll be excited to share those findings. Laura, I see you raising your hand in the chat. Feel free to unmute, or you can type it out. I think
It looks
Dr. Laura.
like they can't
Yeah.
come off mute.
Oh, they can't come off mute. I'm sorry about
Right.
that. Okay. Dr. Laura Weasel had a question, and the COABE presentation, it will be a little bit different than this, and that we're going to go into, it's really more focused on the adult learner, just a couple pieces on the policy and employer, and even more information, especially the recommendations and the key next steps. So the COABE presentation will have like more details from the full report. Yes, the marketing engagement piece is super important. People don't know about programs. I think if you take one key takeaway from this, is that of the 2,000 people we surveyed, 80% said they did not know about available programs in their community. But once informed, whether by phone or digital tools, the way we were doing the survey, 84% said, yes, I want to enroll. And that number was even higher for people who are parents and people with learning differences. So the interest is there, the demand is there. We need to bring this information to our, people with the money to help us fund and support these programs because people want the services. And thank you so much, Ronell. I see people are dropping off. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody in Dallas too. Shout out, message me on LinkedIn or follow us. Make sure you're, staying in touch with All In. Our goal here really is to center the adult learner perspective and understand how can we better design and deliver services to meet those changing needs. So that is really what we're hoping to do. We hope this information can help you better make your program visible, better connect to learners, and better design to really meet the needs where they are.
Thank you, everyone. I see all the comments. Thanks
Yeah,
so
it's
much. And thank you,
exciting.
Sarah.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ronald. All right, we'll continue.
All
We got to
righty.
find another project to do together.